Picture this. It's 2 a.m. You're lying awake, mind racing. Tomorrow's presentation, that difficult conversation you've been avoiding, the endless notifications, the comparison trap of social media, the weight of uncertainty about the future. Your chest feels tight, sleep feels impossible. Now imagine this. It's 170 AD. A man sits alone in his military tent on the frozen banks of the Danube River. He's responsible for the lives of millions. Plague ravages his empire. Wars rage at the borders. Betrayal lurks in his own court. Yet he picks up his journal and writes words that will echo through 2 millennia. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That man was Marcus Aurelius, philosopher, emperor, and perhaps the most powerful person in the ancient world. And his private reflections on anxiety, fear, and inner peace might be exactly what we need in our modern age of information overload and constant uncertainty. Welcome back to Stoic Wisdom. Today we're diving deep into the mind of Marcus Aurelius, the last of Rome's 5 good emperors, and exploring how his ancient wisdom offers a remarkably practical framework for confronting modern anxiety. Before we begin, let me set the scene. Marcus Aurelius never intended to be a philosopher king. Born in 121 AD to a prominent Roman family, he was adopted by Emperor Antoninus Pius and groomed for leadership. But unlike most rulers who sought power, Marcus was reluctant. He was a student of philosophy first, a leader second. He studied under the greatest Stoic teachers of his time and devoted himself to the principles of Stoicism, a philosophy that taught virtue, reason, and acceptance of what we cannot control. When Marcus finally ascended to the throne in 161 AD, he inherited an empire in crisis. The Antonine Plague, possibly smallpox or measles, killed millions. Germanic tribes invaded from the north. The Parthian Empire threatened from the east. His co-emperor and adopted brother Lucius Verus died unexpectedly. His own wife was rumored to be unfaithful, and his biological son, Commodus, showed none of the philosophical temperament Marcus had hoped to cultivate. It was during the darkest periods of his reign, particularly during the brutal Marcomannic Wars along the Danube frontier, that Marcus began writing what we now call meditations. These weren't philosophical treatises meant for publication. They were private notes, reminders to himself, written in Greek, often at the end of exhausting days. He never titled the work. Later, scholars called it ta eis heauton, things to himself. What makes Marcus Aurelius so compelling for our discussion today is this. He wasn't writing from an ivory tower. He was writing from the trenches. He was anxious, overwhelmed, and burdened with impossible responsibility. Yet he developed a mental framework that allowed him to maintain clarity, purpose, and inner peace. And that framework is what we're going to explore. Teaching 1. The Dichotomy of Control. The first and perhaps most transformative teaching from Marcus Aurelius addresses the very root of most anxiety, our desperate attempt to control what cannot be controlled. Marcus writes in Meditations Book 8, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." And in Book 7 he reminds himself, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." This is the Stoic principle of the dichotomy of control, and it's devastatingly simple yet profoundly difficult to practice. The Stoics divided everything in life into 2 categories, things within our control and things outside our control. Within our control are our thoughts, our judgments, our intentions, and our responses. Outside our control is nearly everything else. Other people's opinions, the past, the future, our circumstances, the economy, the weather, and yes, even many outcomes of our own actions. Here's where most of our anxiety lives, in the space where we try to control the uncontrollable. We worry about whether people will like us, outside our control. We stress about whether we'll get the job, largely outside our control. We lose sleep over a global pandemic or political turmoil, completely outside our control. We tie our peace of mind to outcomes we cannot guarantee. Let me give you a modern example. Sarah is a marketing manager. She spent 3 months developing a campaign. The night before the big presentation to executives, she can't sleep. Her mind runs through scenarios. What if they hate it? What if someone asks a question I can't answer? What if my competitor's idea is better? What if this ruins my career? Marcus would ask Sarah. What is actually within your control right now at 2 a.m.? She cannot control the executive's opinions. She cannot control whether they choose her idea. She cannot control her competitor's presentation. She cannot even control whether she gets promoted as a result. But here's what she can control. She can control how thoroughly she prepares. She can control whether she presents her authentic best thinking. She can control whether she listens carefully to feedback. She can control whether she maintains her integrity regardless of the outcome. And most importantly, she can control whether she lets this one presentation define her worth. Marcus faced this constantly as emperor. He couldn't control whether the plague would spread. He couldn't control whether the Germanic tribes would invade. He couldn't control whether his generals would be competent or loyal, but he could control his response. He could ensure he made decisions based on reason rather than panic. He could treat even his enemies with dignity. He could show up each day and do his duty regardless of the outcome. The liberating truth here is that when you genuinely internalize this dichotomy, when you release your grip on what you cannot control, anxiety loses its primary fuel source. You stop catastrophizing about countless possible futures and instead focus your energy on the one thing that matters, your response in the present moment. Marcus writes, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil." He's preparing himself. He cannot control whether people will be difficult, but he can control whether he remains centered, rational, and virtuous in response. This doesn't mean we become passive. We still take action. We still work toward goals, but we hold outcomes lightly. We invest in the process, not the result. And paradoxically, this often leads to better outcomes because we're not paralyzed by anxiety about success or failure. Teaching 2, the practice of negative visualization. The second teaching from Marcus that's particularly relevant to anxiety is what Stoics call premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, or what we might call negative visualization. This sounds counterintuitive, even morbid. Why would deliberately imagining worst-case scenarios help with anxiety? Wouldn't that make it worse? Here's the subtle brilliance. Most anxiety comes from being blindsided by our own imagination. We fear loss because we assume everything will remain as it is. We fear change because we're attached to comfort. We fear death because we pretend we're immortal. Marcus is suggesting we turn toward our fears deliberately, rationally, and with preparation. Not to torture ourselves, but to develop resilience and perspective. Marcus constantly reminded himself of impermanence. He writes, "Do not disturb yourself by thinking of the whole of your life. Do not let your thoughts at once embrace all the various troubles which you may expect to befall you, but on every occasion ask yourself, what is there in this which is intolerable and past bearing? You will be ashamed to confess. Then remind yourself that neither the future nor the past pains you, but only the present. And this is reduced to a very small compass if you only circumscribe it, and chide your mind if it is unable to hold out against even this." He also practiced this with death, his own and others. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. This wasn't morbid pessimism. It was radical clarity. By acknowledging mortality, Marcus stripped away the trivial anxieties that consumed others. Arguments about status, accumulation of wealth, fears of minor embarrassments. All of it seemed absurd when held against the backdrop of mortality. Let's look at a contemporary example. David is terrified of losing his job. The economy is uncertain, his company is restructuring, and he's paralyzed with anxiety. Every meeting feels like a potential trap. He can't focus on his work because he's too busy worrying about whether he'll have work. A Stoic approach, using negative visualization, would have David deliberately confront his fear. What if I do lose my job? What would actually happen? He'd sit with this uncomfortable question. He'd realize, I'd need to update my resume. I'd need to tighten my budget. I'd need to reach out to my network. I might need to take a temporary position I'm overqualified for. My ego would be bruised. I'd feel uncertain for a while. None of this is pleasant, but none of it is actually unbearable. He's faced challenges before. He has skills, relationships, resilience. He would survive. He might even discover new opportunities. By confronting the fear directly, not obsessively but rationally, David removes the monster's mask. The fear loses its paralyzing power. He can now focus his energy on what's within his control, doing excellent work today, building relationships, developing new skills, preparing financially. Marcus took this further. He regularly contemplated losing everything he had, his empire, his family, his health, his life. He writes, "All that you see will soon have vanished, and those who see it vanish will vanish themselves, and the ones who reached old age have no advantage over the untimely dead." This isn't depression, it's perspective. When you fully accept that everything is temporary, including yourself, you stop clinging so desperately. You stop feeling that life owes you stability. You develop what the Stoics called amor fati, love of fate. You accept reality as it is, not as you wish it would be. And within that acceptance, you find a strange freedom. You can enjoy what you have without the constant anxiety of losing it. You can act boldly without the paralyzing fear of failure. You can love deeply without the desperate need for control. The practice isn't about dwelling on negativity. It's about inoculating yourself against the shock of change. It's about developing mental resilience through deliberate rehearsal. Olympic athletes visualize both success and failure. Soldiers train for chaos. Stoics rehearse loss. When change inevitably comes, they're not destroyed by it, they're prepared. Teaching 3. The present moment as the only reality. The third teaching that directly addresses modern anxiety is Marcus's insistence on the present moment as the only reality that exists. This is where Stoicism intersects beautifully with what we now understand about anxiety through modern psychology. Marcus writes, "Confine yourself to the present. And again, do not let the future disturb you. You will meet it if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." Here's the psychological truth. Anxiety doesn't exist in the present moment. It exists in our projection of the future or our rumination about the past. When you're genuinely absorbed in present action, anxiety dissolves. The problem is that modern life has trained us to constantly mental time travel. We're planning dinner while eating breakfast. We're rehearsing tomorrow's conversation while someone is speaking to us now. We're reliving yesterday's embarrassment while trying to fall asleep. Marcus understood this perfectly. As emperor, he had countless responsibilities pulling his attention in every direction. But he developed a practice of radical presence. He writes, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He's not talking about physical escape. He's talking about the retreat into present awareness. Let me illustrate with a modern scenario. Jennifer is a single mother working full-time while raising 2 kids. Her typical evening goes like this. She's helping her daughter with homework while mentally reviewing her work presentation from earlier, wondering if she said the right thing. Then she's making dinner while worrying about next month's rent payment. Then she's reading bedtime stories while running through tomorrow's schedule. By the time she's alone at night, she's exhausted, anxious, and feels like she hasn't been fully present for anything. A Marcusian approach would look different. When helping with homework, she'd be fully present with her daughter, noticing the concentration on her face, enjoying the teaching moment, not letting her mind drift. When making dinner, she'd be present with the sensory experience, the smell of garlic, the sizzle of the pan, the simple satisfaction of nourishing her family. The work presentation is over. It's outside her control now. Tomorrow's schedule doesn't exist yet. All that exists is this moment, and in this moment she's doing exactly what needs to be done. Marcus faced incomparably greater pressures, yet he writes, "Do not be disturbed by the picture that goes beyond the present impression." He's essentially saying, stay with what's actually happening right now. Don't add layers of interpretation, projection, and anxiety. Respond to reality, not to your imagination about reality. This is profoundly practical. Most of what we worry about never happens. Studies suggest that 85% of what we worry about never occurs. And of the 15% that does occur, 79% of people reported they handled it better than expected or learned a valuable lesson. We torture ourselves with phantom futures. Marcus offers a simple practice. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? Not just in action, but in thought. Is this anxious thought necessary right now? Is this worry helping you act more effectively in the present moment? Usually the answer is no. The worry is just noise, static that prevents clear action. The present moment is also where your actual power resides. You cannot change yesterday's mistakes except through today's choices. You cannot prevent tomorrow's challenges except through today's preparation. Everything converges on now. And when you strip away all the mental clutter about past and future, you usually discover that the present moment is manageable. It's the accumulated weight of imagined past and future that crushes us. Marcus puts it beautifully. The present is the same for everyone. What we lose is the same for everyone, and so what is lost is a mere moment. Each moment is equal. The Emperor's present moment isn't more valuable than yours, and what passes is just that moment. Nothing more. Stay here. Act virtuously here. Find peace here. So how do we actually apply these teachings in our frantically paced, digitally saturated, anxiety-inducing modern world? Let's get practical. First, implement a daily dichotomy of control practice. Each morning, or whenever you notice anxiety rising, write down what's bothering you. Then categorize each item, control or no control. For things outside your control, practice release. You might write, I cannot control this, I release it. For things within your control, identify the specific action you can take today. Not tomorrow, not eventually, today. For example, I can't control whether I get the promotion. I can control whether I document my achievements clearly in my review. I can control whether I ask thoughtful questions about growth opportunities. I can control maintaining my integrity regardless of the outcome. Second, practice negative visualization, but constructively. Once a week, choose one fear and examine it rationally. Write out, what's the worst that could actually happen? Could I survive it? What would I do? Have I overcome challenges before? This isn't about dwelling. It's about removing the fear's power through exposure. You're training your mind the way you'd train your body in the gym. Third, develop a present moment anchor. Marcus couldn't use modern mindfulness apps, but he developed his own version. Choose an activity that happens multiple times daily: drinking water, opening a door, sitting down. Each time, pause for 3 conscious breaths. Notice your body. Notice your surroundings. Ask, what is the next right action in this moment? This interrupts the anxiety loop and returns you to reality. Fourth, create a morning philosophical practice. Marcus wrote his meditations early in the day, preparing his mind. You might spend 5 minutes reading a passage from Meditations, writing a brief reflection, or simply reminding yourself of Stoic principles. Morning sets the tone. If your first action is scrolling social media or checking email, you've surrendered your peace before the day begins. Fifth, reframe your relationship with discomfort. Marcus constantly reminded himself that challenges were opportunities to practice virtue. When anxiety arises, instead of thinking, this is terrible, I need to make this feeling stop, try thinking, this is my training ground. How can I respond with wisdom and courage? Anxiety becomes a signal for growth rather than a sign of failure. Sixth, practice the view from above. Marcus often imagined viewing his life from a distance, seeing himself as a small part of a vast cosmos. When anxiety narrows your focus to your own suffering, deliberately zoom out. Imagine viewing your situation from space, or imagine how it will appear a year from now or 10 years from now. This isn't minimizing your experience, it's contextualizing it. Seventh, curate your inputs ruthlessly. Marcus couldn't doom scroll or binge anxiety-inducing news. We can, and it's killing our peace. Apply Stoic principles to your media diet. Ask, is this within my control? Is this helping me act more virtuously? Is this necessary? You'll find that 90% of what competes for your attention fails these tests. Finally, develop a gratitude practice grounded in impermanence. Each evening, identify 3 things you're grateful for. But add the Stoic twist. Remind yourself that these things are temporary. I'm grateful for my health, knowing it's fragile. I'm grateful for my relationships, knowing they're finite. This isn't morbid. It's the antidote to taking things for granted. When you recognize everything as a temporary gift rather than a permanent right, anxiety about losing things decreases and presence increases. Before we wrap up, let's address some common misconceptions about Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism that prevent people from fully benefiting from this wisdom. Misconception 1. Stoicism means suppressing emotions. This is perhaps the biggest misunderstanding. Marcus didn't teach emotional suppression. He taught emotional understanding and regulation. He acknowledged anger, fear, and grief. He just didn't allow these emotions to dictate his actions. There's a difference between feeling anxiety and being ruled by it. Stoicism teaches you to observe emotions without being hijacked by them. Misconception D2. Stoics are passive or resigned. People sometimes think the Stoic acceptance of what we cannot control means not trying to change anything. Marcus was literally one of the most active people in history, leading armies, reforming laws, responding to crises. Stoicism is about accepting reality as your starting point, then taking wise action. It's radical acceptance plus radical responsibility. Misconception 3. Stoicism is cold or unfeeling. Marcus deeply loved his children, grieved their deaths, valued his teachers, and cared about justice and human welfare. Stoicism doesn't eliminate love or compassion. It prevents you from being destroyed when loss inevitably comes. It's love without clinging, care without control. Misconception 4. You need to be perfect to practice Stoicism. Marcus himself constantly fell short of his own ideals. Meditations is full of him reminding himself of basic principles he'd forgotten the day before. Stoicism isn't about perfection. It's about progress. It's a practice, not a destination. Every moment is a new opportunity to return to principles. Misconception 5. Stoicism is pessimistic. Because of the emphasis on impermanence and negative visualization, some think Stoicism is gloomy. Actually, it's deeply liberating. By accepting the impermanence of all things, you're freed to fully experience joy without the constant anxiety of loss. It's realistic optimism, hope grounded in reality rather than delusion. The beauty of Marcus Aurelius is that he embodied these principles imperfectly, in the messiest possible circumstances, while being brutally honest about his struggles. He's not presenting himself as enlightened, he's showing you his work. And that makes his wisdom accessible and practical rather than intimidating. Let's bring it all together. We've explored how Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor writing from the frontier of a crumbling empire, developed a framework for maintaining inner peace amidst chaos. His teachings offer specific tools for confronting modern anxiety. The Dichotomy of Control teaches us to release our grip on outcomes and focus our energy on our responses. Stop fighting reality. Stop trying to control what cannot be controlled. Find your power in the only place it actually exists, in your own mind and choices. Negative visualization trains us to develop resilience by confronting our fears rationally rather than being ambushed by them. Practice discomfort in small doses so you're not destroyed when real challenges arrive. And presence in the current moment reminds us that anxiety exists only in imagined futures and ruminated pasts. Reality is always now, and now is almost always manageable. These aren't abstract philosophical concepts. They're practical tools that worked for one of history's most burdened leaders, and they can work for you. Here's my challenge to you. Choose one teaching, just one. For the next week, practice it deliberately. If you choose the Dichotomy of Control, catch yourself every time you're anxious and ask, can I control this? If you choose presence, set an alarm 3 times a day to pause and return to the current moment. If you choose negative visualization, spend 10 minutes examining one fear rationally. Marcus never intended for his writings to be read by millions. He was writing to himself, trying to survive impossible circumstances with his integrity intact. The fact that his words survived, the fact that they resonate 2,000 years later, tells us something important. These challenges are human challenges. Anxiety isn't new. The fear of loss isn't new. The desire for control isn't new. What's new are the particular circumstances that trigger these ancient patterns. You don't need to be an emperor to benefit from Marcus's wisdom. You just need to be honest about your struggles, willing to examine your thoughts, and committed to aligning your actions with your values. Before we close, I want to leave you with one final quote from Marcus Aurelius that I find particularly moving. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Your anxiety isn't a flaw to be eliminated. It's information to be understood and an opportunity to practice wisdom. The very things that challenge you are the raw material for your growth. Marcus found meaning not despite his suffering, but through his response to it. So start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. And remember, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Thank you for watching Stoic Wisdom. If this resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might benefit from Marcus's timeless wisdom. Leave a comment below sharing which teaching you're going to practice this week. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear about your journey. Until next time, stay present, stay virtuous, and remember, the obstacle is the way.